All right, so let's take a look at Angels in America and our critical theories. I'm not going to go into a great deal of depth with this for two reasons. Partly because this week there's already plenty of other things that I've asked you to spend your time on. But also because, and I just want to reinforce that these are not deep dives into these critical theories. They're basically a way of introducing them to you. But even just a quick look at each one of the theories for different plays hopefully will give you a different way to analyze a play more than just a basic understanding of the structure or what the acting is or that kind of stuff. So, and do theater practitioners do an intentionally Marxist or feminist or postmodern analysis of their works? Maybe not, probably not for most of them. But actually, for a lot of people, they might not ever come across these theories this explicitly within their education, which is a huge reason why I include them here. I hope you're going to take these theories out into your other classes and into the world with you, even though what we are looking at is a basic, fundamental, almost rudimentary application of these materials, of these theories. So, I'm going to try to get through these quick without rambling too much. There's a lot that I could say about Angels in America. My understanding of the play is very wrapped up into my pretty thorough understanding of both Millennium Approaches and Perestroika. I want to remind you that you are not required to read Perestroika, but it is on Moodle if you want to. Now, when Perestroika goes off not in a different direction, but it covers a lot of these theories and a lot of things that happen in the overall shape of the play and the overall structure and arc and story of the play. A lot of things really kick in with Perestroika. So some things that I may be saying in terms of the play will be for both plays, but I'll do my best to indicate when I've gone to Perestroika specific stuff. So, does the work reinforce capitalist, imperialist, or classist values? You could really look at this in a couple different ways. Sure, the work is critical of late capitalism. In this, I can also talk about postmodernism here because that's what postmodern is. It's very critical of a late capitalist period, which we're living in, as as of the 80s or what, maybe even before that. Now. So I'll talk about it when we get there. I do think the work is postmodern in a lot of ways, but is it critical of capitalism? It is definitely critical of conservative economics. It's critical of conservative politics in many ways. That's kind of the point. This play was written as a direct response to Reagan America. Almost everything about it, but in particular his complete avoidance and irresponsibility when it came to the AIDS crisis. It's hard to separate the mix of all the politics. So capitalism is definitely a part of his politics. He was, as we've discussed, or will discuss if you haven't gotten there yet, the play is very influenced by Brechtian techniques and thoughts and theories about the theater, and Brecht was definitely anti-capitalism. So there's a lot tied up in all of that. But at the end of the day, I would say yes, he is. Tony Kushner is the person who, we didn't create it, but he really buys into, and really helped sort of push forward the term, the personal is political. That comes up in a lot of his discussions. So the idea of the politics wrapped up in these people's lives is it's right there. I mean, when I mention that, you're probably like, oh, well, duh, of course. And to say that he's critical of capitalism is just to wrap it up in the whole ball of wax that he is critical of in all the politics he's critical of. Classist. This is where we get into some interesting area with this play. I feel this play doesn't send mixed messages, but it is not a very it doesn't do any work to deconstruct the idea of class. It talks, at least I don't think it does, and there's nothing that's coming to the front of my head that thinks he does it. Certainly not in the way that he deconstructs or criticizes, issues of race and homophobia. So class, I don't know. It's kind of an assumption that everybody in this play kind of has money. We don't really hear about what people. Well, we'll certainly hear what Joe does for a living is all wrapped up in who he is. That's who he is. Roy Cohn, he's a lawyer. We assume that these people are going to have money. Although Joe does at one point point out, I was fourth in my class and I only make $20,000 a year or something like that. So he's wanting to climb up that ladder. So the idea of becoming one of the elite, and that is often tied to class, that is very much criticized and pulled apart by Kushner. But then there's the idea that, I don't remember the line exactly, but I think it might even just be in one of the stage directions, that Pryor lives very simply off a trust fund. So in short, everybody in this play nobody in this play is worried about where their next meal is coming from. And I think that is something that the play it's gone so far to criticize everything about politics. I think it could have dealt with class also a bit more directly in the way it does with other works. It's not by any. I'm not saying that the play is supporting the idea that class is not important, but it doesn't engage with the discussion about class as much as it does about race or sexual identity, or even religion. Is the work conflicted? Does it support a Marxist agenda but also support a capitalist agenda? Tony Kushner is one smart cookie. I promise you, if there's anything that's in this play, it's in there intentionally. Having said that, maybe he should have said more about class. I don't know. I don't feel it's conflicted. I feel like its politics are very clear, and I think Kushner was very intentional with what he put in the play. What does the work say about the socio-economic conditions of the time and place in which it was written? Well, it's very rooted in Reagan era, second half of the 80s. So it sort of assumes it doesn't deal with people who can't afford the things that they want in life. It clearly says that the Roy Cohns of the world are doing better financially than everybody else, but its emphasis is not about class or the socioeconomic conditions of their characters. I'm sure Kushner would dispute this vehemently, but it doesn't jump out at me, at least. What are the material circumstances of the characters, and how does this create meaning? I've covered that. So, another thing that I would like to talk about in the perspective of this play is not just the play itself, but as I've mentioned, you can also look at the play as a product of the time and place in which it came out of. And that'll come up more when we talk about race. So, and possibly when we talk about women. So it's interesting and now I don't know the number exactly or what have you, but the play was written, I don't want to say it was written for specific actors, but there was a company of actors that he was writing for. I'm not saying that when he wrote this play, because some playwrights will write a play intentionally, knowing who's going to play what part, without too much concern about who might play that, about the actors who might play the roles after the initial production. Kushner did have a group of actors that he was working with at the theater where the play was sort of created and nurtured. So that leads into the fact that there are the double casting, where For example, generally, you could probably cast it any way you want right now, but generally, if you saw the HBO miniseries, the way that's cast is kind of how it goes. The person who plays the rabbi at the beginning also plays Mother Pitt. So there's a lot of times in which an actor whose main role is female, such as Harper, such as Mother Pitt, they will take on other characters that are not female. That's just a necessity of telling the story. I don't know, and one may never know, and Kushner may not know, was he saying something about gender? And there's, again, we could probably just talk about critical analysis in just one lump with this play because they overlap so much. Was Kushner intentionally saying something about women by having a woman play a rabbi? I don't know. Was it more of a necessity that, hey, we need to hear these lines from this character, and we have this company with mostly women, and the men in the play can't play that part because there's not time for the costume change before they have to come on in their first scene. So, who knows? But at the end of the day, we experience the play in that way. We see a rabbi being played by a woman. They went to great effort in the miniseries to fully disguise these people, and because they had the resources to really do the great makeup and possibly camera effects. If you were to see it live, you would probably know that that's a woman because the makeup would not be that great. And Tony Kushner was okay with that. He wanted you to see the strings of the angel. He wanted this to be very theatrical, and acknowledge the meta theater of it, acknowledge the techniques of the theater. So, what does the play say about women? The women, when you look at the overall arc of the play, Harper kind of comes out on top. Spoiler alert. She ends up flying off to San Francisco, and she has this beautiful final monologue about hope, basically. So she kind of comes out on top, but she is definitely in a tough place. She's married to a gay man, and she's, the sex star pill popping housewife that she calls herself. What does it say? It says that women, it says many things. It possibly says that, women have a difficult time in this date in New York when you're married to a gay man, especially. What does it say about Joe's mother? She's sort of this over-domineering woman. He's trading in stereotypes of women, but I feel like he's sort of using those stereotypes to contradict them a little bit. At the very end, we do see Mother Pitt becoming a little bit more nurturing. We see her caring for Pryor. So they do have these reversals. But the big heavy characters are all male, pretty much. What does the play reveal about patriarchy? I think the play says that it stinks because it's all tied up into straight male leadership, men in leadership who are straight males, and the difficulty of being gay. I think Kushner would definitely agree that the patriarchy is problematic, and there are elements of this play too. What does the play say about ways in which race, class, and other factors intersect with gender in the woman's experience? Again, I've sort of covered that. I'm not going to ramble any more about that because I do want to keep this as short as possible as I talk more. How does the play define masculine and feminine? That's very interesting. I think one of the most beautifully written scenes in the play, we see Pryor doing drag. I think the character that we are most expected to identify with emotionally in a lot of ways is Belize, a very effeminate black male, gay black male. So it does kind of challenge the idea of strict gender binaries. And again, we can feed this into a queer discussion. But then you also have, and then you have the character of Joe, who is very conflicted about his identity and is having difficulty identifying as gay because he's so stuck in that patriarchal masculine identity. So it covers a lot of ground. What does the play imply about the possibility of sisterhood as a mode of resistance? You do see, especially in Perestroika, you do see Harper and Mother Pitt sort of coming together to support each other. And again, in Perestroika, you do get I can't get, is it Perestroika or Millennium Approaches, where Joe confronts his mother about, why did you come back? And she talks about how hard it is to be a woman and how basically dopish and stupid she finds most men. So there are a lot of things going on with feminism in this play. Although anybody who would give it a second thought would very clearly know that this play was written by a white gay male. Getting into race, that's a bit complicated. And this is the one that I wanted to point out. And if this is the one nugget you take from this analysis, I'd be fine with that. So, what does the play say about race? Not sure. There's a lot of discussion about race. There's, especially between Lewis and Belize. But, going back to that idea that he wrote this for a company of actors, I think I don't know. I would guess easily that there was probably only one black actor in that company, and that's why there's really only one black character in this play. I mean, could the angel be black? Of course, that would be amazing to see a production of this with a black angel. Could the look, yes, there's colorblind casting, which we could talk about all day and if it's good or not. But the way that the characters are written, Pryor is the product of Northern European heritage. Talks about his family being depicted on the Bayeux Tapestry. Lewis is a Jewish man living in New York. Mormons are don't quote me here, but I've known very few black Mormons. So it's the only black character, the only character that's written to be black, I think is what I should probably do before I start saying anything problematic. The only character written to be black is Belize. And that person is a nurse working in a caregiving situation. Working in a job that, I don't know, nurses probably do pretty well, but working in a job that's not identified necessarily as a high-powered job. Of course, Lewis isn't either, so that balances that out, But he's a caregiver. He's very feminine too, and so yeah. So what does this play teach us about African heritage? I don't think a whole lot explicitly, but the inclusion of the Belize character could potentially add to that. What are the racial politics in place? He clearly is. Tony Kushner is clearly a neoliberal who supports who would support equality for all races. And then there's that conversation. I think if you were really going to look at this, you would look at the conversation between Lewis and Belize, where they're in the cafe, and Belize has to finally shut Lewis up and say, "Look, you've said a handful of things that are potentially offensive." Look at that. Is what Lewis says offensive about race? Racially offensive, or I think we're meant to identify with Belize in that moment. What are the poetics? Literally, it doesn't contain African American literary devices explicitly. So queer analysis. This one kind of hits you in the face. I'm actually not going to spend a whole lot of time on this one because the politics are very clear. It's anti-Reagan. It's pro. Equality for all sexual identities. What are the poetics? That's very interesting. Is there a queer style to this play? I think probably so. Kushner called the type of theater he wanted to create the theater of the fabulous. I love that phrase. And it's theater acknowledging that, like I said, acknowledging the techniques of the theater, where you see the ropes of the angel. You use bad makeup, bad beards on the rabbi, really bad wigs, and it's theater. And there might even be a style of performance that is very self-aware. A very self-aware style of performance is very queer, and this is a whole road I could go down, where it's tied into the idea that when we grow up as queer children, we're always being aware of being watched. And so we are thereby always watching ourselves and trying to adjust our mannerisms and behaviors so that we're not perceived as queer. So we're trying to perform straight. And that brings a very self-conscious conscious style of performance in our daily life. And that can make its way to queer performance. So that's why drag is very self-aware. We know we're putting on a huge wig. Now, in terms of the poetics, that would probably most likely just refer to the language and the literary aspect of the play. You could probably argue that there is a queer aesthetic in place, a queer poetics in place, which, looking at the structure of it, which we already talked about in the last lecture, so I won't do that. Does it contribute to our understanding of queer history? Yeah. Are there coded text? Not necessarily. There are not coded text, because a coded text would mean that it's a way for a queer writer to secretly put things into the text about queer life that only queer people would pick up on. This play does not do that. It puts it out on the table, says, this is queerness, we're here, we're queer, get over it. Can we reread a work by a heterosexual writer to? No, he's not heterosexual. What does it say about heterosexism? Wow. What does it say? I think Mother Pitt is the the women. The women are the only straight characters. That says a lot. I think it sort of implies in the HBO film that perhaps, no, it doesn't. I'm not even going to say that. Yeah, so there's something there. That's very interesting. See, critical theories do help you think about these things. How does it illustrate the problematic idea of sexual identities? I don't know. It embraces queerness, and the problem is when you live in a government that that tortures you, basically. Okay, so as you probably see that I had to update this slide. Still another one. So, is the play postmodern? Yeah, it definitely is. It's not explicitly postmodern as something like, Hamlet Machine or something that is intentionally sort of abstract. It's not an abstract play, and you don't have to be abstract to be postmodern. I could talk for an hour about how this play really is postmodern, and to understand how this play is postmodern, it really makes us look at exactly what postmodernism is a bit more carefully. The play really can't help but be postmodern because it is rooted in late 1980s capitalism, as I talked about already. So all the I put some here. Yeah, all the characters have postmodern angst. The fact that it is so explicitly about this period in time sort of makes it has to be postmodern. It wouldn't have to be postmodern structurally or in form, but in content it kind of has to be. And that's an important distinction to make. Is you could have this sort of postmodern structure, but still have a very modernist kind of play, which is what Waiting for Godot does, if you know that, by Samuel Beckett. And it could be reversed. You could have a very you could have a well-made play, a very, very traditional structure that covers postmodern ideas. I think this play does a little bit of both. I think it might be a little heavier on covering postmodern ideas because the characters are living in the postmodern age. These are the poster children of what it means to be postmodern. These characters are. The idea of avoidance and subjectivity, the people in power avoiding these issues, people being ignored because of their race. And there's a whole lot more to avoidance I could go into that I just won't right now. And the idea of subjectivity. Who gets to make the rules? Who and how does the identity of the people who make the rules affect people who don't share that identity? This is still very much going on today. It's very meta-theatrical, and you could argue that is a postmodern technique, too. I've already talked about this. He wanted it to be theatrical. He wanted you to see the wires of the angel. That idea of acknowledging the way that we produce our art acknowledging the mechanics in place of production, which is kind of a Marxist thing too, but the idea of acknowledging that things that in a very modernist play, you would hide the fact that it's not reality. In a postmodern play, arguably postmodern, you acknowledge the techniques. You're not saying, oh, this is perfection or this is an illusion. No, you're acknowledging that this is real. This is the world we live in. We live in a world where you can see the wires of the angel. We live in a world in which life has no meaning because we're just inundated with commercials all day long. That's what postmodernism does. So it's purposely messy and even celebrates its messiness. The messiness of the structure, as I talked about, it's cinematic. It's things just come and go really quickly. The scene between Harper and Pryor, where they're mutually hallucinating or dreaming, is just this sort of fantasia, which the whole play is. This sort of odd little, what is this? What are we doing here? And it celebrates it. It revels in that sort of structure. It celebrates the messiness of the characters. These people are messy, and it's not trying to say that people are perfectible, because postmodernism would not say that. It says that these people are messy, yet they deserve to be happy. If you were strictly postmodern, you would say, yeah, you're messy, meh, and that's life, like it or don't. But this play does have that sort of very modernist element of progress. You know, the world only spins forward is a very important quote from Perestroika. And progress happens, about making progress. Postmodernists might argue that progress really is not so much possible, given the fact that there is no foundation to society. But so again, no work of art is going to be 100% anything. I think that Kushner probably does, and he puts forward in this play, that the foundation of society is unstable. It's not religion. It's not sexual identity. It is not a government. It is not economics. In that way, if that's one takeaway from you for postmodernism, that is the way that Kushner really writes a postmodern play. He acknowledges that the foundation of society is you create your own foundation. It's not something given to you from someone else, be it government, religion, politics, whatever. Borrows from high culture and pop culture. I might not have talked about this a lot with postmodernism, but that's very much postmodernism. You know, Andy Warhol is considered high art now when he makes works of art that look like anime. It looks like cartoons. This play does have a love of high culture in that, you know that Pryor probably goes to the opera or knows, listens to classical music, but at the same time, he does drag, which sounds really fun. And so just for example, it's sort of there. Simultaneity of time, the past and the present exist, the past and the future exist in the present. So you get Pryor relative, family ancestors coming to visit him, and you get sort of the angel, which has a very futuristic element to her, and Perestroika, Pryor actually goes up to heaven, and so time is not fixed. That's a postmodern idea, just as the fact that there's no basis to society. That's what it is. And it gives us a lot of perspectives on marginalized individuals. And that's a very postmodern thing. And that's a good time to point out that postmodernism and queer theory are very, very interrelated. They work very well together. So I'm going to just stop here and make myself stop talking about this play because I'm right at 30 minutes, and that's what I wanted to go to. So a lot we can talk about in this play. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. I hope you love this play as much as I do. I adore it. Bye.